In the ageless expanse, before time found its voice, the universe was a canvas of silent, shimmering light. It was a realm ruled by gods of thunder and decree, enthroned on the celestial peaks of Mount Olympus. Yet, in this divine order, a whisper of defiance was stirring, a flicker of thought that would soon ignite the destiny of all creation. This is the story of Prometheus, a titan whose name means forethought. He was not a god of grand pronouncements or fearsome power, but one of deep contemplation and a heart that ached for a world yet to be born. From his vantage point he watched the earth below, a beautiful but barren sphere, devoid of the spark of consciousness. The gods, in their eternal perfection, saw no need for change. They were content in their golden halls, their laughter echoing through the clouds, oblivious to the silent potential of the clay below. But Prometheus saw differently. He saw not just mud and water, but the possibility of life, of thought, of love, of art. He felt a profound connection to this nascent world, a paternal yearning for beings who could look up at the stars in wonder. And so, with hands guided by a love that defied divine law, he descended from the heavens. He took the humble clay of the earth, moistened it with his own tears of compassion, and began to sculpt. He molded figures in the image of the gods themselves, not out of mockery, but out of reverence for the divine form. Yet these figures were lifeless, empty vessels. They could not think, they could not feel, they could not build. They simply existed, their vacant eyes staring into the endless sky, unaware of their own potential. Prometheus's heart grew heavy. He had given them form, but not soul. He appealed to Zeus, the king of gods, pleading for a gift to awaken his creation. "Grant them the fire of intellect," he implored, "the spark of reason that distinguishes gods from beasts." But Zeus, ever wary of challenges to his authority, refused. "Fire is the tool of the gods," he thundered, his voice shaking the very foundations of Olympus. "To give it to mortals would be to invite chaos, to plant the seeds of our own destruction. They are meant to serve, not to aspire." Prometheus returned to earth, his spirit cloaked in sorrow. He watched his clay children wander aimlessly, huddling in caves, shivering in the cold, living and dying without purpose. He saw their fear of the dark, their vulnerability to the beasts of the wild. And in that moment, a decision crystallized in his soul, as hard and as brilliant as a diamond. If the gods would not share their light, he would steal it. He knew the price of such a transgression. He knew the unyielding nature of Zeus's wrath. But the love for his creation was a fire hotter than any forge on Olympus. It was a love that demanded sacrifice. With a heart both heavy and resolute, he journeyed to the workshop of Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith. There, amidst the clang of hammers and the roar of celestial flames, he found his chance. He took a hollow fennel stalk, a humble plant from the mortal world, and touched its tip to the eternal fire. A single, defiant spark was captured. Shielding it from the whims of heaven, he began his perilous descent back to earth. That tiny ember, cradled in his hands, was more than just flame. It was knowledge, it was art, it was civilization, it was hope. It was the dawn of humanity. He gathered his children of clay and presented them with the stolen light. As the first fire crackled to life, their eyes, once vacant, began to glow with a newfound awareness. They felt its warmth and were no longer afraid of the cold. They saw its light and were no longer slaves to the night. With this gift, they learned to forge tools, to cook food, to gather in communities, and to tell stories around the flickering flames. They learned to look at their own hands and see the power to create. They learned to look at each other and see a reflection of themselves. Humanity was born. But this act of love did not go unnoticed. From his throne, Zeus watched in a fury that eclipsed the sun. The betrayal was absolute. Prometheus, a titan, had armed the very beings Zeus intended to keep powerless. The punishment was swift and terrible, designed not just to inflict pain, but to be an eternal spectacle of divine justice. Zeus commanded his sentinels to seize Prometheus and drag him to the desolate Caucasus Mountains, to the very edge of the known world. There, he was chained to a great rock, his limbs bound by unbreakable adamantine fetters. He was left exposed to the blistering sun by day and the freezing winds by night. But his torment was not to be one of solitude. Each morning, a monstrous eagle, a creature of Zeus, would descend from the sky. It would tear into his flesh and devour his liver, the organ the ancients believed to be the seat of passion and emotion. Each night, his divine nature would heal the wound, his liver regenerating, only for the agony to be repeated at sunrise. It was a cycle of unending pain, a message to all who might dare to defy Olympus. For centuries, Prometheus endured. He hung between heaven and earth, a symbol of rebellion, his silent screams swallowed by the uncaring peaks. Yet, even in his agony, he did not recant. He did not beg for mercy. His body was broken, but his spirit remained unchained. He knew that the fire he had given to humanity was more than a physical flame. It was an unquenchable thirst for knowledge, a relentless drive to question, to discover, and to challenge the limits of their existence. He knew that this spark, once lit, could never be extinguished. He had traded his freedom for theirs, his eternal peace for their chance to grow. Ages passed. Empires rose and fell. Humanity, armed with the fire of Prometheus, built cities that scraped the sky and philosophies that mapped the soul. They wrote poetry, composed symphonies, and gazed into the cosmos, forever reaching for something more. And in their hearts, consciously or not, they carried the memory of their creator's sacrifice. And so we are left to wonder, was Prometheus a traitor or a savior? Was his act one of pride or of profound love? His story is not just a myth etched in ancient stone. It is the story of every innovator, every artist, every thinker who dares to bring light into a world of darkness. It is the story of the human spirit itself, a spirit that, even when chained to a rock of suffering, refuses to let its fire die out. For the fire of Prometheus burns within us all. It is the courage to question, the passion to create, and the hope that, even in our darkest hour, a single spark can illuminate the path forward. His sacrifice reminds us that the greatest gifts often demand the greatest price, and that true divinity is not found in power, but in the love that is willing to give everything for the sake of another. The chains may bind the body, but the light of a defiant heart can never be imprisoned. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to God Story Reborn, and together, let us rediscover the tales of light and rebirth that shape our world.